Can
Okay.
I ask one question before we start?
Sure.
Does
Yes.
anyone have good resources for banks or credit unions who are taking PPP applications for non-members, non-customers?
Well, I have to say that Highland Bank, and I wasn't banking with them, they took mine. I was banking with Wells, and of course they were doing nothing.
Yep.
And so I'm trying to get all of us here plus my screen and talk at the same time. It's like chewing gum. So you could try Highland if you want. I'd be happy to make like an email introduction to the banker that I worked with.
Sure.
If that would be helpful.
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
And
Absolutely.
Roya, do you
Yeah.
know people at Fox Tax?
Yeah.
Okay, I would ask them because I feel like I know people there too, and I feel like they've been sending me a lot of emails and they're giving guidance on the process, so they may know where their clients are having success.
Okay. I'll ask them.
Yeah, the other two resources that you might want to leverage is you probably have a relationship with a CPA firm, right?
Mhm.
Accountants.
Mhm.
I would go to your accountant and they have a list of those financial institutions that are supporting it, that are user friendly. The other place that you can go is also your Chamber of Commerce. They are collecting those lists of those banks that are your community banks, that they will do a lot of the heavy lifting for you to help you getting that application in and through and approved.
Perfect. Thanks, you guys.
Right. Okay. So for whatever reason, I'm having a hard
Glad you asked.
trying to get this swapped out. I don't see that we have anybody else waiting in the waiting room. I normally don't navigate both, so for me to be tripping over myself right now is probably really annoying, but can't help it.
Don't worry about it. And we can go ahead and get started.
All right, let's do.
Let me kick it off by introducing our speaker for today for our
Okay.
WIFS meeting is Julie Key. You'll learn more about her, but her business is KeyeStrategies, a business advisory firm that provides exit planning consulting services. But there's much more to it than that. I've known Julie as a friend and a colleague, I think for a couple of years. We were together in the National Speaker Association Speaker Academy, and I've gotten to know her a bit more along the way. And what I find is that she's very intelligent, very smart about the content and her expertise. But in addition to that, she has the courage to speak out and to talk with us about some stuff that we don't want to think about, like, is there life after our business? So I find her very impactful and very fun and very human. She's a little, so there's a couple of pieces else that I want to share with you. She just released her new book in May, Poised for Exit. I read it and it's a great guide. Just begin thinking about the frameworks of the kinds of questions we need to be asking of ourselves or our clients. But it really begins asking the big question is, what's life after business? So it's a combination of this is what you need to do, but here's some other really personal things to think about. In addition to that, she in June launched a podcast named the same thing, Poised for Exit. I've listened to the episodes and they're fun, they're interesting, and she's bringing in guest speakers that provide content, ideas, and strategies about things that we can think about, tools perhaps that we can use, not just about our business, but our life. So with that introduction, Julie, thank you for speaking to us. Thank you for sharing time with us. And Julie is one of our members of WIFS. Recently did a program for WIFS National, WIFS National, and she's here today to speak with us, the local chapter. So thank you, Julie.
Well, thanks for having me, Mary. Thanks for everyone for sharing and giving me a little bit of information on who you are and what you do in your space. This is a version of a webinar that I've taught and delivered in a lot of different forums to a lot of different organizations. And what I did was I decided that I was going to take the content that I've delivered for business owners and combine it with some of the content that I'm delivering for you today. Mm-hmm. It sounded to me like most of you are, like some of your clientele are small business owners. The privately held companies right now are suffering in a lot of different ways, as we can all imagine and as we maybe personally know. And I think that there's still a lot of murkiness around which way to go, what to do. Business owners are feeling not really clear on their way forward. And I think that there's still a lot of reactionary decisions being made versus clear-cut decisions. And so I would like to just kind of touch on that first before we go into what is business transition and how does that apply to me and in my practice and in my life. So like I said, I think that there's some reactionary decisions being made. I know with some of my clients, they still are really confused, scared. Some of them, I got a couple of them actually that I'm not sure are going to make it, unfortunately. And so I like to approach this from kind of an introspective angle when I find that they're feeling like they got to jump off a cliff, or that there's just that anxiousness that they have inside. And I just ask, well, how have you been responding so far? You know, thinking about the decisions that you've had to make. Have they been knee-jerk, or have you really, you know, taken a step back, you know, take a breath and consult with your advisors, people like us, because that's who we are for them, and figure out where is it that you really need the most help? Where do you feel the most stuck? And to think more offensively than defensively sometimes, to ask them, what are the outcomes that you want to occur when this is over? Because it will be over at some point. You want to still be in business? The answer is probably yes. And so how can you be proactive right now so that you can achieve those outcomes? Because we really don't want the event to control the outcome, if that makes sense. We don't want to blame the event for this event, or we don't want to blame the outcome, right? Or I'm sorry, I'm trying to get to this point here. We have an event, the event was COVID. Well, the event was a lot of social unrest as well. And we don't want that to be the reason why we don't achieve what we really feel that we're meant to achieve. Like maybe, I'm just thinking of one of my clients right now that I just talked with. I'm still kind of churning in the back of my mind about what's going on there. And at some point they're going to land on their feet. Right now they're feeling like they're not. They're like one foot in the air and the other foot on a banana peel. But they will eventually figure it out. I just know that they will. And I don't know what that's going to look like. But I think that if we can just come from a place where we actually take a stand for them and believe in them, I think that that makes a lot of difference. And then when you're thinking about your own situation at home and your own business, your own firm, your own practice, some of the principles and things that we're going to talk about today, you can apply to that. So this is kind of like a three-pronged approach. So it's your home life, which is basically a business. It's a going concern, right? We want it to remain a going concern. Your business, your firm, your practice, and your business owner clients if you work with business owners. And I think that a lot of us do. This is an exercise that I like to have my clients go through on a regular basis, but especially now because of that reactionary anxiousness that they have, the confusion, not exactly sure what to do. And making decisions is tough, but making no decision is worse than making a decision that ends up not working out, because then there's no forward movement whatsoever. And for them to think about how to move forward, sometimes they just got to go back to the basics. And so this is a conversation about going back to the basics, going back to the basics of what your values are. And you can do this yourself. You can do it with your clients. You can have this conversation with your clients just on a high level. I'm not saying that you have to do what I do, but I think that just having this background information that you can draw from when you're having conversations with people who are really on the edge, it solidifies your relationship with them. It strengthens that rapport and that trusted advisor role that you have, that trusted advisor, that person that our clients need to lean on more now than ever before, and in more ways than just in our technical prowess. okay? And so when I say go back to the basics, I'm talking about redefining what our values are, what's important to us, how do we make our decisions, and articulating what those are, reminding ourselves, reminding our team, here's what we value, here's how we make our decisions. And if we don't weigh our decision options against our values, then there's a good chance that we'll make the wrong choice. And then a SWOT analysis is good for everybody. So you could even do this on yourself when you're trying to decide, like, what are the areas that I need to improve on? What are some initiatives that I should take action on right now? A SWOT, if you're not familiar with that acronym, is your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. So obviously we all have strengths. And I think that as women, we're not very good at identifying our strengths sometimes. So I would challenge you to spend more time identifying your strengths than your weaknesses. Won't be easy, but I would challenge you to do that. And for your firm, if that applies to you, because they're going to be different. You as an individual have your own strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. There's probably going to be parallels, right? There's going to be a little bit of overlap, but not necessarily with your firm, even with your household, even with your family life. So, and then the weaknesses and the opportunities many times are two sides of the same coin. Mm-hmm. So if I identified one of my weaknesses as I could probably get better at learning some more software programs. There's a couple software programs that I need to learn more about and be more fluent in being able to apply them and integrate them with the work that I do. And so on the flip side of that, the opportunity is that I would be able to, if I learned those, I'd be able to probably save time, but maybe even save myself some money, because time is money. And if I'm spending time on things that don't generate revenue, then I'm costing myself money. It's an opportunity loss. I don't think that we really calculate that like we should. I don't think that we really examine how much our time is worth. So maybe that's something that you could challenge yourself to do. That's an opportunity. Challenge yourself on how you spend your time. And then threats, many times threats aren't really anything that we can do a lot about, like COVID. But we have to acknowledge that they're there. We have to figure out, okay, we know that this exists. How do we work our way around it? And some things you got to work your way through, but sometimes you can work around them. And your business owner clients need to do the same thing. I think that if you could spend, especially now, if you could spend an hour a day just assessing what's good and right about your life and about your business, that it would do wonders for your ability to think innovatively and creatively about the future. I'm not talking about problem solving. I'm not talking about, thinking about what's going on in society. I'm talking about thinking about your strengths and your resources, because we all have them, and then figuring out how best to use them in the future. And then as far as a team goes, we all have a team. So for those of us who are professional advisors, we need to have good, solid team members in different disciplines, especially if we're working with privately held companies, and a lot of you are. What I'm talking about is having really good, solid referral partner relationships with people that are in the legal industry, accounting industry, insurance, banking, financial planning, if that's not who you are. And business owners need relationships with every single person in all of those categories, and then some. If you work with privately held companies who happen to be family business, which we have a lot of those in Minnesota, that's kind of another animal, right? We could talk about that all day, and I do. I work with a lot of family businesses. So the owner that's wanting to transition the business to a child, actually the last two companies that I met with and talked to about working together, both have children in the business that they want to hand the business off to, but they also know that next generational transfers, second gen, third gen, fourth gen, the statistics of their success rate is severely depleted by fourth gen. It almost doesn't even exist. I think that second gen is like 24%. actually make it. And the reason for that is because they have no plans in place, no governance in place. There's an entitlement issue. You know, a lot of times families think that just because you're born into this family that you should have a job in the business and you ought to be an owner. And that's not the case. There has to be a lot more thought and planning that goes into it aside from that. So sometimes family business psychologists need to be on your team. Okay, and they're out there. But just for you as an advisor to your clients to have good relationships with those folks, but also for your own going concern at home. We all need to have an attorney to help us put our estate plan together, right? We need to de-risk ourselves legally, financially, and so on. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that too, because that's actually part of the front gate of exit planning. Talking a little bit more about getting back to the basics. One of the things that I do for the clients that I work with is to help them to create a strategic plan. And people are kind of afraid of that term, strategic plan. They think that it's complicated and that it's lengthy and detailed and, you know, full of numbers and metrics that don't make any sense. And that's not my kind of strategic plan. I want my strategic plan for my clients to be on one page, and we're going to identify no more than 3 years out what are the capabilities, what are the things that we really want to accomplish as a going concern, as a company. 3 years out, no more than that. In fact, right now, we're only going a year out. We're identifying major initiatives, 3 to 5 initiatives, and a financial goal, a revenue goal. And then we're dialing it down and figuring out, okay, what do we got to do over the next 90 days in order to accomplish that 1 year objective? For one of my clients, their 1 year objective is to completely, to start completely implementing all of their transition plan. So we have the transition plan put together, but there's steps in the transition plan that they haven't executed on yet. And it's tough to do sometimes because when you need all these advisors to be a part of this process, it gets to be expensive. So you really have to prioritize where's the biggest risk, you know, and your owner clients need to figure out where are they at risk the most. That may not be something that you would want to tackle. It's something that I do all day, every day. But again, being part of that advisory and being that person who the owner can go to and being kind of a friend as well as someone who holistically looks at things and helps them really figure out what's the next step. Don't have to know the next 25 steps, but we can help them figure out what the next one is. Converting fixed expenses to variable is another area that I think all of us could probably do better at. I don't know about you guys, but I have saved a ton of money the last few months because I haven't had to travel. I've been sitting here right at world headquarters and not driving my car much either, right? I don't think any of us are. So you look at your bank account and you go, wow, I was really spending a lot of money on stuff I really didn't need to. But there's still ways and areas that, you know, personally and professionally that we can cut some expenses. And one of the ways that I try to do that with my clients, regardless of whether there's a pandemic or not, we got to go through the P&L. We got to figure out, all right, where are we wasting money? Let's cut the waste first. And then we'll look at accounts receivable and we'll see how long we've been carrying people, because they do. They have no policies for collection, okay? They're being the bank and there's a cash gap. And so one of the things that I like to do is try to close that cash gap as soon as I can. Cash is the most important thing right now. Have cash in the bank, cash in your business. You can do more things when you have cash. And there's certain things that you don't need cash to pay for, right? Shoring up cash and using a line of credit makes sense right now because money is so cheap. So another thing that I had recommended to one of my clients was, you know, you got some business credit card debt that's kind of significant. Okay, we're talking just under $100,000. It was a lot. And, you know, high interest rates, 17%, 18%, 19%. You combine all of that and then you go, okay, well, it's going to take us probably 30 years to pay all this off at this rate. Let's not go there. Not right now. Let's take out a line of credit if we don't already have one, or use one, or rewrite it, right? Because the rates are so low. rewrite the line, pay everything off with the line, reduce your monthly expense from all those minimum payments that totaled, you know, $3,000-4,000 a month, and bring that payment down to like 500 bucks. And that's what we did. And it was great for cash flow. I'm not really wild about the term the new normal, because I don't think that we're really in a normal yet. I don't think we've figured that out. I think that we're still working on that, but it does get thrown around a lot. And these are the areas in a business that really do need to be examined. And I'm not saying that they have to dissect every department, but I think that if you look at it from this standpoint, from just these sectors, you as a business owner, your clients could look at this and go, okay, well, leadership is pretty good. And I think I got a good succession plan going, but our marketing is so not dialed in. We have no ROI measurement on our marketing. In fact, I was going to cut it, and I'm a big proponent of marketing. I think that you have to have marketing, but it has to work. It's an investment, not an expense. At least it should be. When you think about what drives revenue in a business, in a practice, whatever, it's sales and marketing. Everything else pulls money out of the company. But your marketing should support your sales. Your marketing should drive leads so that you can make sales. And the two of them should be married. They're not the same thing, but they should be married. Finance is another thing, right? Not just cash flow, but how about margins? How are you charging for your services? How are your clients charging for their services? Could just a pricing adjustment make a lot of difference? And then working with a CFO, if they don't have one internally, to help them with projections and to help them with budgets. And yeah, that's kind of a fluid thing right now. I get that. They still have to have them. You can't get in the car and drive to Atlanta and have no idea how you're going to get there. It's a long ways. And even if you have, you know, Google Maps, or you got a paper map, or you got both, and you run into a detour or a bridge is out or whatever, you got to figure out a different way to get there, but you're still going to go. Whereas in a business, if you have no idea how you're going to get anywhere, then you're just in the car driving around, and that's a waste of time. So that's why it's important to have a plan, even if it's a simple one. Nothing wrong with simple. Human capital, I'm not really wild about that term, but it gets used a lot. But the people who work for our companies are our most valuable asset. When we think about where enterprise value comes from in a company, your enterprise value is primarily made up of the intangibles in a business, not the tangibles. Even though the lenders lend on, or like to lend on, the tangibles, the building, you know, the real estate, the equipment, the inventory, they like that touch stuff, right? Because they can count it, and they can figure out what it's worth by having an appraisal. Whereas the intangibles, that's where the real value is, right? Your brand, your reputation in the marketplace, your customer list or client list, and your employees. Those are the most valuable parts of any enterprise. And so that's why I think there's been so much movement around culture and building culture and retaining key people. And that is vitally important right now. Unfortunately, business owners think that they have to cut, you know, at the top, right, where all the expenses, and a lot of that is in payroll. But you don't want to get rid of a key person if you can help it. Finding a replacement for that key person who has a lot of intellectual property on your business, most likely, and that if that's not documented, that needs to get documented. That's another whole story. But finding another person to replace that person is going to be really, really difficult. So they really need to think through, is this where I need to cut expense? Is this really important? Who can I afford to live without, and who can I not afford to live without? They don't always make those kinds of logical assessments, because this is an emotional time, and emotional assessments and decisions can be really, really costly. So when we're talking about transition planning, exit planning, I kind of like to differentiate those two really quick for you. Exit planning, everybody's going to exit their business. They're either going to exit on their own terms or they're going to exit on somebody else's. That's just a fact. And exit is as a form of a business transition. When I talk about business transitions, I'm talking about other forms of transition, like say, for instance, a management buyout or a management buy-in, buying out a partner, taking on a partner, acquiring another company or being acquired. You know, that M&A integration piece, that is a transition. And most of the time it doesn't work. If you Googled that and looked up the likelihood of when two companies coming together actually succeeds, you will see that the statistic is extremely low, a success rate, which is really sad. The reason for that is because a company is acquiring another company based on the numbers, and they're not making the decisions based on everything else, all the other factors, right? The intangibles. How are these people going to work together? Can we logistically work this out wherever our geographic locations are in our industries? Do they mesh? Does it make sense? A lot of assessment has to go into that. So when it comes to owner readiness, which is a part of exit planning and transition planning, we're talking about a lot of de-risking and a lot of assessment that needs to go into that de-risking. And you could even apply some of this, like I said before, to your own personal going concern, okay? Your household is a business. If you're a solo act, it's still a business. And like for me, when I look at this, I go, okay, got my estate plan set up, buy-sell agreement, don't need one, I don't have any partners, I'm the only owner. Do I have contracts exclusive to my business? Yes, because I do have an agreement that I have with my clients, and we have kind of a recurring revenue model here. And recurring revenue really does drive value in a business. Not so much for me as a practitioner, because my business is about me. I probably won't be able to sell this business. I've done it before with other businesses, but this one, probably not. And that's okay. I didn't get into it to sell it. That's, I already did that. This is more of like a labor of love for me. But most businesses should be set up as a going concern that they can sell, as an asset that they can sell. And agreements and contracts that set up like maintenance and service and, you know, for customer contracts, right? 1 year or 2 year, whatever it is, that recurring revenue really does add enterprise value. So if you're in a business where you might be able to add on some kind of service or maintenance or something that someone could subscribe to or sign a contract for, that increases the value of the business that you have or that your business owners have. And again, I'm trying not to get too deep in the weeds here. There's a lot of content, but these are just some things for you as an advisor when you're working with your business owners, that if you know about it and if it occurs to you, that you can actually ask them about. So it doesn't mean that you're going to do the work. It doesn't mean that you're going to do the assessing, but the more that you know as a trusted advisor, the more you're going to be able to provide value to your clients, and the less replaceable you are. You know, we want your clients to believe that they cannot live without you. And the way to do that, especially now, everything I'm reading is to provide value, to ask questions, to kind of get out of your lane a little bit, just in exploration, okay? And having good relationships with attorneys is pretty darn important. Contingency planning is another part of exit planning and transition planning that needs to be done for business owners, but it also needs to be done for people from a personal level in a family situation. And that's not just in making sure that you have an estate plan. And when we talk about estate plans, we're not just talking about a will. We're also talking about powers of attorney and healthcare directives and trusts. You got to have those things. And if you don't, boy, oh boy, there's a lot of mess there. So what is it that you need to protect? What are we trying to protect? I've noticed, and when I talk about intellectual property, I've noticed with business owners that they don't always think that what they have is valuable within their business, like their practices, their processes, their systems, their products, their services? Is there anything there that's proprietary that really does need to be protected, even if it's a trade secret, even if it's a trademark, right? I just recently protected KeyeStrategies. I decided not to protect the logo because I've already revised my logo since I launched my business 9 years ago, and I probably will again. And I think that, you know, you can protect your logo if you're General Mills, but for KeyeStrategies, not so much. But I really don't want anybody using my company name anywhere. And so if I protect it with a trademark, then that gives me a little more muscle if I have to go to court. And that's another whole thing. But it's a part of legal de-risking. It's a part of contingency planning. Keep people documenting what they know. And when we talk about contingency planning too, this reminds me of something called the 5 Ds. And some of you may have heard of the 5 Ds, but we as a world have just lived through one of them, and that's disaster. And we're still living through it. A lot of us are, right? But the 5 Ds are death. People do die, and they die intestate many times, unfortunately. Divorce, happening a little more now than we would like, I think. Disability, people get sick, people have accidents, and they can't work. Disagreements, partners have fights and they want out. And then there's disaster or distress. And disaster can take on many forms. It can take on the form of a pandemic. It can take on the form of a cyber attack, a natural or man-made disaster. Those are the different things that we're trying to guard against. And there are certain things that you can do now that can protect you in case something happens in the future. And we all know that. But business owners aren't very good at contingency planning. So my hope is that since we've just gone through and are going through this disastrous thing, that they're shoring up cash, that they're taking out the insurance policies and getting the coverages that they need that they maybe didn't have before, making sure that they've got the basics of their usernames, passwords, PINs, contact people, for every involvement that they have, every account they have, every licensure that they hold, those kinds of things. I literally have a contingency planning worksheet that my assistant and I created that I give to every single client so that they have everything all in one place. So that if something happens to someone, someone else can pick up and access what they need to be able to continue working and the business stays open the next day. And you should do that for your home life as well. So very briefly, this is kind of a simple roadmap, if you will, for exit planning. And EPI stands for the Exit Planning Institute, and they created the value acceleration process. And the reason why they did that is because they've found, and I do too, that almost every single business and business owner that want to transition from their business or exit finds that they as owners are not ready, which is why we just talked about it, and finds that their business isn't ready. And they find also that there's a gap in value. They think their business is worth this much, but it's really worth this much. How do we close the gap? Because if we don't close the gap, then they probably won't be able to maintain their lifestyle going forward. And then they won't be able to exit. Or they'll have to acquire a company to close the gap. That's one way that you can do that. Anyway, so these the gates here, the Discover Gate, that's where the assessment of personal financial preparedness is essential, and that relationship that business owners need to have with a financial advisor. It's paramount. Now, the company that manages their 401k is not their financial advisor, and sometimes they think that they are. Or they'll have assets in a lot of different places. I've had clients with this too. So married couple, they both own a company. They don't work for each other. They work for themselves. They have 2 different companies and they're very successful. And they had, old 401ks here, IRAs here, stock over here, cash management account over here. And they needed to have someone bring all that in together, right? And make a plan and a roadmap from a holistic standpoint so that they could figure out, okay, how much longer do we really have to work? Because business owners really don't know. And so that's why that's on the front end. Business valuation is another really important aspect of exit planning too. And I don't encourage owners to go get a full-blown valuation unless they have to, because they're expensive. But we can still get a baseline. We can still get a range of value, whether from their accounting firm or from an investment banker who maybe thinks they might get a deal in a couple years, so they'll do a free one. There's a lot of different ways that you can come up with just getting a baseline or getting a range so that we know where we're at. Because that's going to be one of the first questions, right, that you as a financial advisor would ask. Well, what's your business worth? And we really need to know the actual number. And then in the prepare gate, that takes the longest, because that's where we're preparing the owner, we're preparing the business, and then once we get through that period, which can take anywhere from 2 to 4 years, it says 2 to 6 months here, but that almost never happens. Unless they're under distress and they have to do something. If someone dies or someone's sick and they don't have time, they have to just move quickly. That's not optimal, right? We want people to exit on their own terms. Anyway, getting to the decide phase is like, okay, do I keep this? Do I have to grow it? I'm more educated now as an owner. And then at the end of the day, do I sell? Do I keep? Do I sell part of it? Lots of options there, hopefully. At least that's the goal. We want to have more than one option. And we want to, if we're going to be selling the business externally to a strategic buyer or a financial buyer, we want to get an auction situation going so that we can get the best possible terms and price for the business so that the business owner wins. Because if the business owner wins, everybody wins. Okay, so before we go into a conversation about your questions and your what ifs and how comes, I want to tell you just about the two initiatives that I launched recently. One is a book called Poised for Exit. I wrote that book because I wanted to tell the story of women entrepreneurs. I couldn't find anything in my research on anyone who had written a book on women exits and women owner exits. And they're a little bit different. I've lived through it myself. So I tell my story and I tell the stories of several of my clients who I've worked with and how it went for them. Kind of mess to success, if you will. Each of the chapters, and it's a very short book for a reason, each of the chapters has a very short checklist after each chapter. And then at the end of the book, I have more extensive tools from some national firms that I have worked with. I chose to get tools from national firms because I knew that this book would be, kind of all over the place, not just in the Twin Cities. But I do have a lot of firms that I work with locally, and not as much with the national firms I represented, but it makes sense to do that kind of thing. I think it just helps business owners to get the conversation started in their mind before they sit down and the fee clock starts ticking, if you know what I mean. I really encourage my clients, when they've got matters that require legal counsel or matters that require time with their accountant, both of those generally charged by the hour. We want to do a discovery process first and start thinking about what we really need to know and see if we can come up with some of our answers, not legal answers, but just answers, so that we can shorten the discovery process for the advisor so that it doesn't cost them as much when they go in because they know what they need, right? So many times you go in and you have no idea what you need. And so just getting to ground zero, right? Because you're behind the 8 ball, just getting there can cost thousands of dollars. So you have somebody that help you think through that. It really can save time and money. And then what I wanted to do with the podcast and what I've been doing actually, to Mary's point earlier, is to take the content that's in the book and just expand it and have it be content that resonates with advisors, with business owners, but primarily business owners, but advisors too, because we have to work with them and help them. So we need to know what makes them tick. We need to know what their problems are. We need to know what kind of questions we need to ask them and help them through and make connections for them. So the folks that I have featured as guests on the podcast are business owners, advisors to business owners, specialists in their field, short show, less than a half an hour. And so far, so good. But that's really what the show is for. So I would love if you would subscribe to the show, listen to it, share it with your clients, with your colleagues, and the book too. I didn't, publish the book as a moneymaker. Generally, books are not money makers. They're just ways to kind of get the word out and create awareness. So my goal is to break even on the book, but to really just get the message out there and create awareness around what really needs to happen in transition planning, because so many business owners, here's the statistic, I didn't share this with you before, but the EPI, the Exit Planning Institute, has done surveys across the country called the State of Owner Readiness Survey. And if you want a copy of that survey and the stats that actually, it was a research project that they did here in the Twin Cities in 2017. And you can find it on my website. So just go to KeyeStrategies.com and you'll be able to download the report for free. But 79% of our small business owners in Minnesota who took that survey stated that they had no idea, no written plan whatsoever on what they were going to do for their future business exit. Yet, the vast majority of people in this country are employed by baby boomer business owners, by small business owners, not just baby boomers, but small business. And the boomers make up 11 or 12 million businesses. That's a lot. And most of them aren't going to exit well. The ones that are not the lifestyle businesses, they'll just probably have to shut the doors, but the ones that have been trying to build an asset because they're not planning. So again, the book, the show really just meant to spread awareness, create awareness, work collaboratively with other advisors like you to help our clients transition well, because when they do, then everyone wins. And we don't lose clients, and we don't lose businesses that are employing people in the communities of our great country. We need them. And so that is all I have for today for my webinar presentation. I'm going to take the slides down, and I think I am anyway. And then I want to hear from you now. Let's just talk about questions, ideas, feedback, whatever it is that you have on your mind right now.
So Julie, Catherine just put a message up about this. We didn't actually see the slides.
Oh,
There
the
were a
whole
few.
time?
Yeah,
Well, we didn't know there were slides.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
They were beautifully done. Beautifully done. We loved them.
I am so sorry.
I hope you
Why did that
spent
not
0
work?
minutes creating them.
I've only been using Zoom for 3 years. Wow. You should have told me that they weren't up.
I wondered if you intended for them, based on a few things you said. I thought, does she think we can see slides? But
Yes,
you
I
were
do.
holding our interest, at least I think you were holding our
Yeah.
interest just fine without the slides, and I was taking good notes. So
Dang it.
I thought, like, this is really interesting. I took notes too, and I thought, well, most people, teach to the slides. I thought, this is really interesting. This is good. The presentation held my interest. I took notes. I've learned some
I
things.
know.
Well,
I thought about it because you said, so if you'll see that, and then you kept going, I'm going, uh-oh.
okay. Well, I wasn't
Well,
looking
there you go.
at the chat. I just had the slides up. I was just looking at the slides. For whatever reason, my new monitor doesn't like the screen swap. And so whenever I screen swap, it either drops your pictures or it drops the presentation. And I've been using Zoom a long time, so I don't know exactly what I'm doing wrong. I haven't figured it out, but I feel really bad you didn't get to see the slides. My apologies. I'll send them to you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I'll send them to you, and then you'll be able to see the notes, because I had some notes. I always write notes in
Okay.
slides too.
Oh, good.
And then that way you can kind of compare them. If you took some notes, you can kind of compare and add and everything. I don't normally do it this way. I feel really bad. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Shoot.
It was still valuable. And I have a question.
Yeah, please.
But I want to open it up to questions more pertinent to your presentation. But, as a chapter, we struggle with transition planning.
Oh, yeah.
And we're a nonprofit. So the commitment you make is to do volunteer work.
Mm-hmm.
And so just like kind of top of mind, if you have any suggestions, because it's been more or less the same board members for many years. And number one, we get a little burnt out, but number two, we really do need fresh ideas.
I
Like
understand.
there's members and people in the community who have really good fresh ideas, and we would, as a chapter, we would benefit from that infusion of different energy and new energy. So just curious if you have any sort of high level thoughts on that.
Well, ironically, I am going through something similar myself. I didn't mention this to you guys, but I launched the chapter here in the Twin Cities for the Exit Planning Institute in 2016. So I've been the chapter president for 4 years, and I decided a year ago that it was probably time for me to pass the baton and have someone else come in with some fresh ideas. And we have the most successful chapter in the country. However, EPI doesn't really give us a whole lot of direction on how they want us to go about the succession process, and that we don't have terms. Like, a lot of organizations have terms. So I guess that would be what my first question would be. Do you do elections? Do you have terms? Kind of like NABO? No?
Technically we have terms, but we sort of bend the rules because, and they don't, National isn't strict about enforcing them. Because if they did, we wouldn't have a president, we wouldn't have a board this year. So yeah, the terms exist, but we haven't committed to enforcing them, or sort of bootstrapping.
Got it. Yeah, I approached EPI because they have had chapters transition in the past, but they didn't go well because they were presidents who just stepped down and just said, I'm done.
Yeah.
And then they had to have someone step in to try to rescue, but there was no good continuity going on. And so those tended to go by the wayside and had to be relaunched. And so I'm kind of writing the book for them right now on how to go about doing it. So what I did was I started planting seeds and asking people probably more than a year in advance, are you interested? Because for EPI, you have to be a credentialed exit planner. You have to be a SEPA. They won't allow anybody that doesn't have that. And that, I get that, you got to know the process. And I got a lot of no's, and I was expecting that. But I did have 2 people that said, yeah, I am interested. And then, had conversations with both, and one seemed a little bit more qualified than the other. And so we met with, EPI Global and said, all right, this is going to be the person, and we're going to work together, and I'm going to stay on as, past president or emeritus or whatever for at least a year. And EPI really wants me to do that too, because they don't want to have the same situation that happened before. They put a lot of time and money into the chapters, and if it falls apart because the leadership, drops the ball, they are asking, right? They can't require, but they're asking, would you step in if it doesn't work out? Of course I will. I worked so hard to build it, right? So that might help, just start talking to people and asking, make a list of, your most qualified that you feel are the most qualified, and just go to coffee and just see. I mean, if you can outline, some of the benefits that you've derived as, being in that chair, like what it's done for you, I think that makes it a lot more convincing to get people involved that are really good. And it's tough to fire volunteers. So you want to make sure that the best of your ability to bring people in that are committed to making sure that the organization succeeds, and not just people that want to have their face shown. I've had plenty of that too. And I just invited people to get off the board.
That's a good way to put it.
Well, I mean, they don't show up to the meetings, but they want to be there to glad hand and have their picture shown at all the meetings. Now, I'm not talking about the chapter meetings. I'm talking about the planning meetings and steering committee and stuff. They're always too busy and they can't do it. It's like, well, then you can't be on the board. So
Okay.
tough love, I guess.
That's helpful. Yep. No, that's helpful. And it's not intimidating.
No, it's just,
it's a reasonable process.
For sure. for sure.
Yeah.
We can talk more about that offline sometime, Nancy, if you want.
Okay, thank you.
Keep you posted on what I'm doing.
Sounds good.
I gotta jump off, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks so much. It was so nice to meet you.
Good to see you.
Same.
I'll
See you,
get
Maria.
everybody's email. I'll make sure and send you the slides.
Okay.
All right, other questions?
I have a question on, Julie, how do you get the business owner to get their head around it, right? Because what I hear so many times is, and whether it's your leader, the leader of your family, the leader of your business, I don't want to think about it. And yet the next thing out of their mouths is, oh, I want to retire. And you're just like, okay, how do you get them to, I don't know, because they're scared, right? They're scared and they don't know what to do. I mean, you talked about, here's some things you can want to consider to do, but how do you get them to even take that first little baby step?
Well, owner readiness and business readiness can't occur until the mindset of the owner is such that they are ready to make a change, right? Sometimes that change is forced, and sometimes they're just ready because they know that they have to be smart and assemble a good team and they don't have all the answers. Some business owners are too proud to ask for help, and unfortunately that's not to their benefit. But the ones who are smart enough to know that they don't have the answers and that they do need other people to help them, it's a matter of just taking the first step. They don't need to eat the whole elephant all at once, you know, a bite at a time. But exploring what it takes, and I think just having them have the questions occur, right? That's what I was trying to get at today, was just help you think of the questions that should occur to them, but don't always occur to them. We get in so much trouble where we start taking action in areas where we don't know what we don't know, right? If I don't even know that I don't know something, I'm going to get in a whole lot of trouble. So just getting to the awareness level, right, where we know that we have to ask some questions about stuff we don't know anything about. That's the goal. My hope, like I said before, is that through what people have experienced, even if they've had a really good year, you know, and COVID didn't affect them at all, they're still scared. They're still scared. Even if I have a couple clients that are having a great year, but they're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Yeah. So, you know, hopefully that won't happen. I don't think it will, but I think just naturally as human beings, you know, we kind of retract. So I'm hoping that because they've gone through this, they've already realized that taking no action is not a good choice.
And I'm not an expert on this particular topic, but sometimes just asking questions, I call questions for which you have no answer. So you say you would like to do this. That's interesting. What would that look like?
Mm-hmm.
What would that mean to you? Do you have a time frame?
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? Oh, you don't want to retire, but you do want to retire. And just open it up and let people begin exploring what they're thinking, because so much of who they are is the business that they've built.
Yeah, that is their identity.
Yeah, and you sort of start just letting them begin to just, you know, just casual conversations and opening it up and simply saying, so what might that look like? What have you thought about that? What are the upsides? What are the downsides? And just see if you can get them into conversation to even get the words, because they've been thinking about this, but we get the words and get what they're thinking, the words in their head out of their mouth, and they can begin hearing themselves. They begin processing it. It doesn't mean you have to jump to a decision or do anything right now, but you sort of prepare yourself to have a different way of thinking and looking at it. Because I think when most business owners think about, you know, succession planning and the next generation or what they're going to do, is like freak out. On top of where we're already anxious, to think about doing that makes us even more anxious, because who are we going to be without our business?
That's exactly right. And part of exit planning that I did not talk about today is next act planning.
Yeah.
Like, what am I going to do with my next act?
Yeah.
How will I remain relevant and productive What am I going to get up for in the morning? Those are all relevant questions, and that isn't anything you can answer in 5 minutes usually.
Got to think about it. And
If I start hearing things like, well, I'm going to go golfing and fishing and, volunteer and watch the grandkids, so those are all fine. But I just think that a true entrepreneur who's, constantly focused on productivity and achievement would get really bored. And I think just, having something that's edifying and fulfilling and being able to use what they've learned and passing that on in some way, I think make for a more fulfilling life. And they just have to figure out what that is. Women also, and the reason why I wrote the book for women, not just because I lived through it, but I really found that I had a heck of a time figuring out what was going to be next. I was so scared when the phone rang and it was our business broker saying that we had a really good offer on the table. I just felt my heart go like right into my throat. And I should have been really happy and excited about that. But the first thing I thought of was, oh my God, what am I going to do without my business? And I had 4 kids.
when you still have the 4
Not
kids,
like
it's sort of
I still have 4.
like college or something. Like, oh my, who am I now, and what am I going to do? And
Oh man,
it's
yeah.
work.
And then, and for women, it's the household, it's the kids, it's the marriage if they have one, it's the business, it's the employees who become like family, and all of those things that she's taking care of. And then when life happens and there's transition, right? People grow up and move out, and there's divorces and houses get sold and businesses get sold. Those are all part of who she is in her life. And if you take all of that away, what's left?
Soul searching question.
That's the question. What's left? And there's a lot left, but she may not be thinking that there's anything left.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway. Any other thoughts or questions from anyone?
This was very good.
Thanks.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Yes.
It was fun.
Very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Very good.
Thanks. Thanks,
Yay.
Mary. Yeah, I hope I just, send me feedback on the show, on the book. If you have feedback on what the next book could be, content that you think would be really helpful for what you do. I am planning on writing another book, so.
Got
like
the writing bug, huh? I love it. It happens.
There'll be more, yeah.
Uh-huh.
The slides were great.
Slides were great. That's good feedback. Those were killer. Did you do those yourself? Well, as a matter of fact, no.
You were a very poised speaker, so we were all listening and engaged, even though you had no slides. So
Yeah.
you probably don't need slides.
No. Yeah, I do. There's stuff on them that you guys need, so I'm going to send them to you because there was stuff that I didn't cover.
Okay.
But I think it'll just be helpful review. So
Thank
Okay.
It was
All right.
fabulous, Julie. Thank you so much.
thanks a lot,
Thank
you guys.
you, Julie.
Good to
Take
see
care of yourselves.
everyone.
Bye,
See you
Maria.
soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.